Hi, today we'll talk about the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act. This important legislation was passed in 1968, so this year we're celebrating its 50th anniversary. To celebrate, I'm trying to visit as many wild and scenic rivers as I can and to learn as much about the Act. So today I'm going to share a few things I've learned about the Act. First of all, to even be considered eligible to be a wild and scenic river, the river has to have two things. First, it has to be free-flowing, and that means the section of river designated as wild and scenic. And it's important to note the entire length isn't always protected. It's typically a segment. That segment can't have dams on it except for like small low-head dams. And there can be dams upstream of the segment that control the flow, and it can still be considered free-flowing on that segment. Second of all, it has to have what's known as outstandingly remarkable values. And Section 1B of the Act, I have the Act here, this is my cheat sheet, talks about them being scenic, recreational, geologic, fish and wildlife, historic, cultural, or other similar values. And other opens up a lot of possibilities. In my backyard, the Middle Fork of the Hood flows by this crazy lava flow, the Parkdale lava flow, and that's a hydrologic, geologic, remarkable value. And there's other remarkable values that are used. Wilderness is used sometimes, botany is used sometimes, but the other similar opens up a lot of other possible outstandingly remarkable values. So again, to be eligible, free-flowing, and contain at least one outstandingly remarkable value. The original act in 1968 declared 8 rivers as wild and scenic. The Middle Fork of the Feather in Idaho, the Middle Fork of the Clearwater in Idaho, that contains the Selway and the Lochsaw, and that's where the idea for the Wild and Scenic Rivers even came about. The Wild and Scenic Rivers Act came about. Sorry, sometimes I talk a little bit too fast. And also the Rogue River, the Middle Fork of the Feather in California. This is a big, deep canyon, basically inaccessible except by kayak and full of class 4 and 5 rapids. So among kayakers, a really famous river, but less known because it's so challenging to get access to it. And the Rio Grande in New Mexico. And those that kayakers maybe aren't familiar with are more in the Midwest, the Wolf, the St. Croix, and the 11 Point. And those are the original 8 rivers that make up the Act. And the Act talks about how to add more rivers to the wild and scenic system. So it started with 8 and now it's grown a lot bigger. And to become a wild and scenic river, one of two things can happen. An act of Congress. Congress can declare an eligible river as wild and scenic. Or if a river is already a state wild and scenic, the governor can ask the Secretary of Interior to do it, and the Secretary of Interior can do it without Congress. Very few happen this way. They're almost always done by an act of Congress. When a river becomes wild and scenic, you get a couple of important protections. First of all, you can't dam that section anymore. And the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act was really a response to the dam building era of the 1900s. And so in the mid-60s, 1968 when it passed, it was basically built as a way to stop dams on certain sections of river moving forward, right? So you get no dams, plus you get a management plan that protects and enhances those outstandingly remarkable values. So the outstandingly remarkable values are very important. They're why the river gets established as a wild and scenic river, and they're also what's protected with the management plan. So one important thing to know is the words wild and scenic are thrown around a lot, and the rivers actually get subcategorized as wild or scenic or recreational. So a wild river, the Middle Fork of the Salmon is wild its entire 104 miles of its length. A recreational river means it has a road right next to it. So the South Fork of the John Day here in Oregon has a road next to it, and it gets classified as a recreational river. Other rivers where the road is not right next to it but close by get a scenic designation. And it's typically, on most rivers, it's broken up into pieces. Like part of it is recreational, part of it is wild, and part of it is scenic, or some combination of those three. Like the Rogue, for example, the first part from the Applegate River confluence down to Grave Creek is recreational, and then from Grave Creek down to about Foster Bar, it's wild, and then downstream of there, it's scenic. And those are based off how far roads are away from it, and they get different protections based on that. So in Oregon, there's 58 wild and scenic rivers. In the country, there's about 208, and it kind of depends on how you count them. You know, sometimes, like the North Fork of the Smith, for example, in California, which is an amazing wild and scenic river, the main stem is counted as one of the 208. But all the creeks that flow into the North Fork in California also have wild and scenic protection. So Like Perditite Creek is also a wild and scenic river, but it only gets counted once. So, you could count above 300 if you counted tributary creeks. In other rivers in Oregon, like Weich's Creek or the Donner and Blitzen, also have tributaries that also gain wild and scenic status. But there's about 208 in the country. Like I said, 58 in Oregon. California has 41, which is their number 2 in terms of number of designations. Rivers like Idaho has 12, Washington has 13, Utah and Colorado have 1 each. So, every state has a different number, based on the politics of the state and the number of rivers. And Oregon is definitely like leading the way in terms of number of rivers. Alaska has the most river miles. It has fewer designated rivers, but the ones that are designated cover a much longer reach. So that's all I kind of want to talk about with wild and scenic rivers. A couple of just things about if you care about these places and want to protect them, you going out and visiting them and using them helps. Us using our public lands makes a big difference. And if you know about a place and you know about its protections and you want to write a letter to Congress, I'd highly recommend it. It really makes a difference. You can write an email, you can make a phone call, but if you sit down and type out a letter and put it in the mail, that makes a huge difference. So I would urge you for the 50th anniversary of the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act, please take a few minutes, write your congressman, congresswoman, senator, and just tell them about a place you love that you want to protect, or a place that's already protected, and thank whoever did that for working for that protection. So that's it. Thank you very much, and I hope to see you sometime on the river.